Marte will win it. A shot into left field, and the Mets, thanks to Escobar's leadoff double, plates the winning run. Starling Marte, the hero tonight. Mets win it 3-2.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 105 of Sports Speak. Hope you're doing well. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
I got another Rutgers head here, Liam Gaughan, big-time Phillies sports fan. We'll be talking some Phillies, Eagles, and Sixers with him in a bit. But, of course, me and Tim are both based in the New York area, and there was something big that happened. It was the Subway Series. And, Tim, let me just play you this. And that happened twice. How about a sweep by the Mets? This is beautiful. And I hear you're a little upset about the starting lineup that the Yankees have put out for tonight's game as well.
Yeah. Well, first off, let's start with that series, because let me tell you something. Zero expectations yesterday when you have Domingo Germán facing off against Max Scherzer. I think the expectation was the Mets was practically going to dominate that game, although for us to practically blow it in the ninth, disappointing, but it was a good battle, at least in game two. But the fact of the matter is this. The Yankees, it felt like, although now looking at it, last night, I would have probably told you, Eddie, it was immediate response to, we just got swept by the Mets, so we're turning around and we're making a trade now, when in really 101 cents, Kansas City's coming to New York today, so that's why the Yankees made the deal on Andrew Benintendi to make traveling, relatively easy, since he was planning to come to New York anyways. But what ticks me off is not that we lost to the Mets. Listen, the Yankees, it ticks me more off about them losing to Houston than anything else, because of the fact that this is the team that's going to be your biggest holding point from making the World Series. But what ticks me off the most is that the Yankees turn around, trade for Andrew Benintendi, and they haven't won a game, obviously, really, or they really won a series in transition through this whole all-star break coming back. And now the fact of the matter is, first game of the series against Kansas City, you're practically showing Andrew Benintendi as your leadoff hitter and giving arguably your best hitters around him, outside, of course, Aaron Judge, an off day. There's no DJ LeMahieu, no IKF, two of your best bat-on-ball hitters. And the Yankees are starting Marwin Gonzalez, Joey Gallo's thing in the 7-hole. It's just horrendous. I can't stand it. I absolutely cannot stand it. It is frustrating me to the point, because the point of trading for Andrew Benintendi was to get Joey Gallo out. And this is another thing that pops in my mind. I don't want to start another discussion, but this is the last point I'll make in this regard. I know the Yankees traded for Andrew Benintendi, and they got him for a relatively cheap price. But I still want to get another outfielder, because the fact of the matter is this: I don't want Giancarlo Stanton rushed back, because I'll tell you something: Achilles injuries. I know we've seen, for example, what happened to Kevin Durant in basketball. Different sport, but how much of an impact, if you extend an Achilles injury, that can have. But in baseball, your lower half means everything. So him having an Achilles injury and they're going to try to rush him back in half the time does not make sense, because it impacts both sides of the game for him, both fielding and offensively. It's much different compared to the Stanton upper body injuries where, hey, he can still play the field. He's just a liability offensively. To me, no point in rushing him. But the big thing is, in my opinion, the Yankees need to go get another outfielder, because I still can't stand Aaron Hicks. I don't think Aaron Hicks is the answer. I don't think Joey Gallo should be anywhere near the Yankees roster. He should be DFA'd by now. I think the Yankees should go get Shohei Ohtani. That's enough of my frustrations for now. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. A little bit.
Yeah, but personally, I'm thrilled. You know what? All these Yankee fans that were all pumped, and all of a sudden then last night and the night before, then all of a sudden they turn it to, 27 rings versus 2. Well, guess what? The Mets won twice in a row. So
you should ask for Hill how he feels. He was at the game yesterday.
Well, I was texting him. He was pretty disappointed, but you know what? The fact that the Mets were able to be resilient late in the game, I don't know why David Peterson was pitching in the 8th inning, but still, the Mets won the game. It wasn't the prettiest win. The first game was much better, but still, back-to-back wins over who was supposed to be the best team in baseball. Pretty good, and I'm excited for the next two games at Yankee Stadium. But, we have a Yankee fan and a Met fan here. Let's go to someone who's unbiased and is not a New York fan. So given what you've seen from both teams, Liam, the Mets or the Yankees, which team do you see going deeper in the postseason this year?
Well, I would like to just start off and say I think both you New York fans are greedy. Your team sit atop the payrolls, and you just want more players, bring in more superstars. I'm a Philly fan. We haven't made the playoffs since 2011. It's been years of struggling, and I'm here listening to Tim complaining about getting Andrew Benintendi for absolutely nothing, giving up nothing. Gallo, he's been terrible in New York, absolutely, but that team is just full of superstars, and they always will be full of superstars because they can pay to bring in the best players in the league. Personally, I think the Yankees will probably go further in the playoffs. As a Phillies fan, I just have this bias against the Mets, and I'm still not convinced that they're good, even though we're 100 games into the season. And I mean, that's not the case. They are a very good team this year. So I think it'll be interesting. I think both teams have serious World Series possibilities here. But as a Phillies fan, maybe we can get a little Philly underdog magic late into the season. I'm still holding out hope for that.
Yeah, I like to debate that point though real quick, because here's my thing, because you want to compare the two teams as being primed, at least for the World Series run. In my opinion, when it comes down to the postseason, pitching matters. And listen, the Yankees, I know they're trying to go for Luis Castillo right now, which would be a big trade if the Yankees could get him. But when I look at the Mets, and I'm not saying this because I'm frustrated with the Yankees, but when I look at the Mets in terms of offensive consistency, where you have guys somewhat for average, Jeff McNeil, great example. And then you have that big slugger such as Pete Alonso. You have capabilities with guys like Starling Marte to steal bases, get on base, and so on, and some production out of Mark Canha. But when you look at the Mets rotation, there is really 1 through 3, and when everyone's healthy, 1 through 4 can all pitch in big moments consistently. You've seen the Mets bullpen not collapse. What's killing the Yankees, my point, which really makes me worry, which is why I think the Mets can go on a deeper postseason run, is that while the Yankees started off hot, now the injuries are coming. We saw them come for a little bit. Obviously, we saw early on in the season, Eddie, where the Mets had their big injury woes. But the Yankees, they're getting their worst woes now. Some of the Yankees' biggest players, not just offensively, but even in the rotation, or say in a bullpen, such as Michael King recently, having a season-ending injury is going to be impactful. And to me, that's too much of a hole I feel, because the Yankees, from my standpoint, going to the season, and I know it sounds crazy, but I always felt the weakness was the bullpen. And while they started off hot, it's kind of showing that way again. And really, outside of Clay Holmes, Yankees right now have no one to consistently rely on at this point, which is why I think the Mets are more primed right now for a World Series run than the Yankees.
It's tough to really, we talked about this a couple of shows ago, and, the Mets are going to have competition with the Dodgers. Yankees are going to have competition with the Astros. The Yankees have more postseason experience on their roster, but the Mets did better against the Dodgers while being without their two best pitchers than the Yankees have done against the Astros when they were fully healthy. So that's why I still have faith in the Amazons this year. But let's turn it to the Phillies, because I feel like every year now the Phillies are like 500 or so. The bullpen is terrible, but the offense is great. And unfortunately for you guys, first Bryce Harper hurt his shoulder, couldn't play the field. Then he gets hit with a pitch and he can't bat either. So now you're without Harper. Kyle Schwarber's playing well. The lineup's great, but the rotation, the pitching staff, lots of troubles there. So Liam, with 2 months left in the season, do you think the Phillies are going to make any moves at the deadline, or do you think they can make a potential run into the postseason?
Well, surprisingly, the team hasn't done too bad since Harper's been out with injury. And actually, the bullpen has been fantastic this year. What's been killing him is the offensive consistency. They'll have a night where they put up 7 runs and then get shut out the next day. I think the biggest disappointment here is Nick Castellanos. He's just not been hitting well for him. They expected to bring him in and be a good average hitter and hit some homers in a smaller ballpark. But I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do at the deadline. They don't exactly have a great farm system to trade for big name players. They were looking at Benintendi, and obviously now he's going to New York. that's not going to be a viable option. I am happy, I think, with the team that they have in place. These guys have the potential to be really good, but it's really just been the consistency this year. I think that they can compete with anybody. Right now, their starting pitching rotation is a little banged up. Trying to get Eflin back into the rotation, so they might be looking to get a starting pitcher in, but it's going to be a back end player, if anything, for a cheap price. So nothing. I don't think anything crazy is going to happen. And I don't want to make any crazy prediction about them making playoffs, because every year I get my hopes up and they just let me down. They've done so for 10 plus years now. But Philly Rob has been he's been a great interim manager for him, so maybe he can bring the Phillies to the Red October.
Well, there's one problem if you guys go to October, and that's that Jerry's Familia is on your roster, and he's someone who blew 3 saves in 1 World Series. But I mean, the NL is still pretty open with the wild card spots. San Diego's been great. Obviously, it looks like the Mets and Braves are both going to make the playoffs, but with the extra wild card spot, that's opened it up. If maybe a team from the Central gets in, or if the Phillies could go on a run, or the Giants or something. So it's definitely possible, and you never know in these 3-game series what could happen. We've seen wild card teams go on deep playoff runs before. But let's transition to the gridiron. NFL training camp started this week. A lot of players in action. Then you've got a lot of other ones that are at practice, but they're not practicing, like DK Metcalf and others, because they're waiting on their contract situations. But a couple of weeks ago, Liam, we did an episode and we were discussing the NFC East, and Tim had the wild take and the audacity to say, when he was ranking the NFC East teams, that the Giants and Eagles are probably tied for second. So I don't even know where to start here. Liam, just give me your take on the Eagles heading into this season and how you feel that they can contend in the NFC East.
Well, expectations for the Eagles are through the roof in Philadelphia this year, and I think it's very funny how the attitude in Philadelphia can just wildly change from year to year. I think, the Eagles have extreme potential and could make a deep run into the playoffs, but I think right now Dallas still has an edge on them just on experience. But I think Philly and Dallas are your clear 1 and 2 front runners until Daniel Jones can figure out how to throw a football.
See, hold on, because before Daniel Jones could throw a ball, let's not act like Jalen Hurts couldn't hit a receiver wide open in the end zone at all. Granted, Jalen Reed drops wide open catches left and right, but the fact of the matter is this: Jalen Hurts is inconsistent. He is a good rushing quarterback, but how can you go 27 for 30 one game and then turn around and go 9 for 30 the next game? Jalen Hurts is a solid quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But the fact of the matter is this for the Philadelphia Eagles: only beating below 500 teams last year. That's all you could beat. The Dallas Cowboys at least beat above a couple of 500 teams. You lost to the New York Giants. Let's be honest. You lost to us last year. And yes, we split the series, but there's nothing lower than the totem pole than losing to the New York Giants.
Okay. Now, first of all, the reason that the Eagles lost that game was because Jalen Reagor dropped multiple potential game-winning touchdowns.
You scored 6 points. That's not the whole reason. You still had your starting quarterback.
Okay.
Come on now.
Let's remember
he played the whole game. He threw 3 interceptions. 3. Jalen Reagor's not the whole problem to why you lost.
All right. Well, let's think about last year, week 18, what was going on. The Eagles were playing for a playoff spot, which they got. The Giants were running quarterback sneaks with Jake Fromm on third and 9.
And that's absolutely okay, because Joe Judge is gone. He's now calling even better. He and Matt Patricia, of all people, are now calling plays with Bill Belichick for Mac Jones so they can call QB sneaks on 4th and 10. It doesn't make sense to me, first off, that whole situation. But to go back to the point about Philadelphia, it's not the fact that I don't think Philly's not good, and I'm not trying to overhype my New York Giants by any means, but Philly is a walking contradiction every season. I'd say the last 2 years, defense, inconsistencies, nobody can stay healthy. You turned around and traded Zach Ertz away, right? Which, hurts a little bit because while, yes, Zach Ertz, it was about time. He didn't know what his future was. And Dallas Goedert's a very, a solid tight end. Don't get me wrong. But when it's all said and done, that's your face. That's the face of, Philadelphia, in my opinion, of the one consistency going back to your Super Bowl outside of Fletcher. And Fletcher Cox, let's be honest, he's aging. He's not, getting to the elite status he once was, which is okay. But the fact of the matter is, I don't feel like there's change. Yes, you turned around, you transition coaches. Obviously, you fired someone in the middle of the season last year. Everyone's on that kind of new rebirth, rebound in the NFC outside of Dallas Cowboys and Washington, which, let's be honest, who even remembers they exist? Because I think the Commanders are simply the worst team in the NFC East. But when it's all said and done, I mean, the Giants' offense was horrible last year, and I know that, but their defense wasn't. And Dable has a capability of bringing a more versatile offense, and I'm not even worried about Daniel Jones, if I'm being honest. I think Tyrod Taylor can win games for the New York Giants. I really think he can. And I think the Giants have some depth, and I'm not saying that the Eagles don't, but you can't convince me that you're going to go on a deep playoff run when you only beat below 500 teams last year. Because every team that faced that situation in the NFL playoffs last year got absolutely swamped in the first and second rounds.
All right.
So it makes no sense to me to say that Philadelphia is the second best team in the NFC East, other than the fact that they're all playing weak opponents. Goes back to my point about the New York Giants. They're playing nothing but weak opponents. When you look at schedule, the Giants face a lot of easy teams that don't have quarterbacks or a lot of issues, which is why I think the Giants are going to end up beating the Philadelphia Eagles this year in terms of standings.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Tim, I've done this podcast with you for more than 2 years. What do you always say about teams and why they fail? You say it's because they stay too complacent. Well, the Eagles made changes. It's not like this is the exact same roster.
You gave a first-round pick for a wide receiver who, I don't care what anybody says, of course he's going to get wide open when Derrick Henry gets the ball 30 times a game and you're run committing every play.
He can catch.
I bet you he doesn't even have 1,000 yards this year. I bet you he doesn't even get 1,000 receiving yards this year for the first time in his career.
Right,
I bet you.
Well, we'll see, but that's still an improvement from Rieger, and Devontae Smith is going to improve from next year. Jalen Hurts, it's not like he regressed as the season went on. Sure, he still has his flaws, but he got better progressively as the season went on. I still have faith in Hurts that he could potentially play well on this team. They made some solid draft selections.
Hold on, but then let me ask you this. What happens to Jalen Hurts when you're one game above 500 again this year? What happens when you get eliminated in the first round of the playoffs? You going to another quarterback?
Well, I'm not worried about that in this debate. My only concern in this debate, Tim,
percentage.
Okay, my only concern in this debate, Tim, is that the Eagles are going to finish ahead of the Giants. I don't care if that means they go 9-8 because that'll definitely get them ahead of the Giants.
But we're talking about too the Eagles going on a playoff run or a wild card run. This team's not good enough. This team's not good enough to go on a playoff run. I'm not saying the Giants are either, but the Giants at least play the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans.
The Eagles play them too.
They play the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to have Drew Lock under center. The Eagles don't have to play the Seahawks.
Okay, Liam, I'm going to let you take some of this argument for now. I can't.
Well, I want to say the Eagles last year, they played to their strengths. They played the running game. And, Jalen Hurts doesn't have necessarily the proven arm in the NFL yet, but he makes the right reads, he makes the right plays. So, the NFL is all about progression. Look at Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, how many years? It's only his third year in the NFL. And
right, but see, hold on. See, I'm sorry to interrupt, but see, to me, I'm tired of hearing that debate. Because again, if you're a special quarterback in the NFL, and statistics of recent prove it, if you are an absolute superstar quarterback, and I'll make the same argument about Daniel Jones too, why I don't think Daniel Jones is that good of a quarterback. You will do something spectacular and not maybe win games, but you will show on a consistent basis that you are at least a solid quarterback in the NFL by the end of year number 2. Josh Allen is a walking exception. Matthew Stafford is the only other exception of the active starting quarterbacks currently in the league. Everyone else that's a quarterback that is not a superstar, He's currently below average quarterback in the NFL. Every quarterback in the league has done it by the end of their second year at minimal. So for me to say Jalen Hurts, and I'm not saying that he's not good, but he's a mid-tier quarterback. He's not an up above level quarterback. He's not what the Eagles are hoping he's going to be. So I understand the development, but I'm tired of hearing this because it doesn't tell anything in today's modern NFL. If you were something, you were going to already show it. And I haven't seen that from Jalen Hurts. Yes, he has a versatile running game, but Lamar Jackson showed it in year 2. He won an MVP in year 2. You can't compare him to other mobile quarterbacks and say, oh, what could be, when it's not. The completion percentages are far different. The production level, Lamar Jackson is a much better quarterback, even injured and with no receivers, than Jalen Hurts will ever be. Kyler Murray is a much better quarterback than Jalen Hurts will ever be. And that's the closest comparisons he has to him right now. I can't see that comparison of talent. It just can't happen at year 3. And I'm not saying, again, he's not going to be good, but it's unrealistic because that doesn't happen in the NFL today with quarterbacks.
Still better than Daniel Jones, though.
I agree. I agree. But at the end of the day,
I
you
think
can't
that
say it's going to be elite level. You're hoping for something that's not going to happen.
I don't think I ever said that he was going to be elite level. But I think, too, that the thing is, the quarterback is not your entire team. Yes, it's a very pivotal position on the field, but you have everyone else on your roster. They have a sound defense, and they've got the pieces around him to be successful. So, while yes, a lot hinges on the quarterback, but I think there's more than that. It's a team game at the end of the day for them to make a run.
It's a team game, but do you feel any of your halfbacks can be healthy? Because I don't. For me personally, I don't feel Saquon Barkley, for example, to be healthy, but at least have some faith in Matt Breida and other backs in the Giants system. What about in Philadelphia?
I mean, I trust that Miles Sanders will be healthy. My worry is that he's not going to be used enough. That was the problem last season, the first half of the year. For some reason, he wasn't getting the ball, but they changed that as the season went on. He got more.
And what about the offensive line?
The offensive line has made some positive strides. It's still old. It's aging. But you have a mobile quarterback and you have a dynamic running back, so it's not too vital. The more important thing was their defense, because their defense was so injury riddled all throughout really the last 2 or 3 years. And they drafted Jordan Davis. They added to the linebacking core. So I feel okay. And you know what? If they're not going to go on a deep playoff run, it's whatever. But my whole reason for bringing this up is that they will indeed finish ahead of the Giants in the NFC East standing. So let's leave it at that.
I will bet against that highly. I will bet against that highly.
We'll probably bring that up again in a couple of weeks. But Liam, I think in the left corner of your room, a Sixers logo. So let's talk about the NBA. Now, James Harden is coming back to Philly, but he did take a pay cut so that the Sixers could try to sign a few more people. Now, they haven't actually signed anyone yet since that's happened, but how do you feel about the Sixers heading into next season in the Eastern Conference with whatever's going to happen with the Nets and then, of course, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami? How do they shape up in the conference?
Well, they did actually sign people. They were able to bring in Daniel House Jr. and PJ Tucker because of the pay cut. I like the additions, but I don't really know if it's going to be enough. The biggest key for the Sixers has always been Joel Embiid's health, and I love Joel Embiid. He's my guy, but every playoff he's dealing with some sort of injury, and that seems to derail the entire Sixers season. I'm not sure they'll ever get past the second round of playoffs. I'd love to see him get past the second round, but that's going to also depend on if James Harden comes back and is the same James Harden of last year, or if he's now healthy and the MVP James Harden. But overall, it's a very competitive league. I do really love the NBA offseason and how you see new guys, superstars moving from team to team. It seems very exciting, like it's anyone's title to take. Compared to the days of old when we always saw the Warriors and Cavaliers. I hated those years. And, I hope the Sixers do make a run and, actually get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I do not know. I will reserve all optimism.
Yeah, it's tough because first of all, we don't know if the Kevin Durant domino will fall, and suddenly with the news the other day that the Celtics wanted to trade for him, which by the way, I think is insane that they would consider giving up Jaylen Brown, who was arguably their best player in the NBA Finals this year, better than Tatum. If the Nets got him, it would be hilarious because if you remember, the only reason the Celtics got Jaylen Brown is because they got the Nets pick in that awful Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce trade. So it'd be really ironic if he ended up back with Brooklyn, but I don't really see that happening, and I think it would be a really poor move by the Celtics. Nets, no matter who's on the roster, who's not, I still don't have faith in the team because of health, because of Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons doing whatever, and because Steve Nash is the coach. The Bucks, you need Giannis and Middleton healthy. It's pretty apparent. Giannis couldn't do it without Chris Middleton with the Celtics in that second round last year. And Miami, I still feel is still missing a piece to be able to really contend for a championship. But the opportunity is there for Philly for sure. And like you said, if Embiid plays to the level he did last year, they're in great shape, but Harden's got to take the next step up because he had some flashes of his former self, but overall was not the same player he was in Houston with Brooklyn or with Philly last year. So Tim, I'll go to you. Eastern Conference pretty wide open going into October. And like I said, the domino hasn't fallen with if Kevin Durant's going to get traded. But given what we have now and what the rosters look like now, where do you see the Sixers shaking up in this?
I still see the Sixers being a marquee team that's going to be competing and battling for the East. Obviously, Boston with that defense is still going to look very good for seasons to come, regardless of who's on that roster. And Miami, again, we talked about how big just that past off season was for them in terms of making them a contender in the East. But, for Philadelphia, this is huge for the 76ers because this is honestly, I can really recall, Eddie, the first time for James Harden personally will step back to make a decision for a team to try to, I'm not saying not be selfish, because James Harden, I'm not saying he's a selfish individual, but it's more of, I've never seen him step back and say, hey, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win a championship. No matter where he's been, even when he was in Houston, I never really felt that James Harden was willing to take pay cuts or take certain things to try to build depth. And yes, there's still a domino effect to happen, but all Philadelphia needs is a couple of role players. That's all they need. They need a little bit of depth. And again, I know we've been talking about the process. It's the process. The process is over with. It's done with and over with. I'm tired of, in that regards, of hearing that aspect of it. It's about the now. It's about the present. Philadelphia on paper should have been a team that should have already been to the Eastern Conference Finals, in my opinion, over the last 2-3 seasons, and was a marquee team to be battling for a championship. Obviously, the whole transition Brooklyn made them a favorite, but obviously didn't pan out for the Brooklyn Nets. I feel the one thing that Philadelphia has really working for them, Eddie, the most is that, and this is the one thing I love about basketball too, teams that have quiet off seasons sometimes make really good decisions. Most often or not, end up being the teams that we see in the big picture, being not just the biggest surprises, but the teams making the biggest playoff runs. If they could just continue to have a quiet offseason, make a couple good depth signings, and make sure that they're helping improve their biggest needs, I could see Philadelphia stacking up there with Miami and Boston and battling for an Eastern Conference championship without a doubt. But at the same time, it all relies again, like you said, on Kevin Durant, because I still feel there's possibility in Brooklyn to do something. I'm not saying win a championship. I'm not saying we hope, but there is possibility in Brooklyn for them to do something big if they're willing to follow the same suit as what James Harden is. But let's be honest, that's not happening. And until then, there's going to be a lot of dysfunction in that organization.
Yeah, even as a Nets fan, I can't have any expectations for them because I don't know who's playing for the team. I don't know if Durant's going to be on the roster. Looks like Kyrie's going to be on the roster, but who knows how much he's going to play. And Ben Simmons has still not picked up a basketball since he joined the Brooklyn Nets, and he just takes pictures in front of his TV. So I don't know what to expect from him, and he also can't shoot the basketball. And all they've done this offseason is bring back Patty Mills and trade for Royce O'Neal. So I don't have any expectations for Brooklyn. Philly, I think, is in a much better situation. No, I'm not saying that the Sixers necessarily won the trade, because I still am happy that the Nets traded James Harden rather than him just walking in free agency and bringing in Seth Curry, for example, and maybe Ben Simmons pays off eventually. Maybe that pick pays off eventually, but it's better than the Nets just letting him walk. So I am still under the impression that that was a win-win deal. And I said that because I had to deal with both Liam and Anthony Serrano going out with multiple Sixers fans the night of the trade, both wearing their Sixers gear to celebrate. So I stand a case with that. But let's wrap up. Liam, got to talk about Rutgers football, because Big Ten Media Day was just the other day, and we're only 5 weeks away from the 2022 season. We don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback, whether it's going to be Vedral or Wimsat. Neither of them were at Media Day. They sent Adam Korzak, which is hilarious, and Johnny Langan. But how do you feel about Rutgers coming off of the 5-7 season, getting to the Gator Bowl because Texas A&M had COVID? Do you think they'll become bowl eligible with 6 wins this year? How do you see them going through this season?
I'll be honest, Eddie, I haven't followed Rutgers football all that closely just because of their terrible past in recent years. I have some friends who work for the football team that just tell me about how much improved they are, and I'll see when I believe it. Or, wow, said that wrong. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Maybe they can finally win a Big Ten game at home. That'll be the first step to improvement. And then we'll go from there. And if they get into a bowl game, hopefully they can actually compete in that, and just keep improving the roster and eventually be competitive in the Big Ten, and hopefully be a good program by the time USC and UCLA join the Big Ten. So that way we're not getting kicked by them.
Yeah. Well, let me follow up with this to finish things up. What's your opinion on the Big Ten expanding to the Pacific and bringing in USC and UCLA?
Well, I'm back and forth on that, because I do like it. Making the super conference basically, but the problem with that then too is it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC making 2 big super conferences, and the traveling isn't going to make much sense. It's going to be really exciting for football and basketball, but if you think about the other sports, about having to travel across the country to go for a swimming and dive meet or a field hockey game or whatever it might be, and it's just going to be very taxing, I think, on some of these student athletes that aren't necessarily going to be going on to the next level to play professional sports. And, it'll be very interesting. I'll be interested to see if the Big Ten adds any more. The SEC, Notre Dame is a big name out there that both conferences are looking to add. And, I think it's going to be very interesting going forward.
Well, that'll wrap up today's show. Liam, we appreciate it. I'll see you at RU sometime soon. But reminder, follow our show on Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. And that'll be it for today's episode. Stay tuned for next week. MLB trade deadline on Tuesday. So we'll be breaking down all that action that happens at the deadline. If Soto or Ohtani or someone else gets shipped, we'll talk about that next week. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off of Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend.